Welcome to Outta Pocket. Here's your host, Michael Davis.
It is time to get out of pocket. I am your host, Michael Davis, on this TGI Friday lineup, joined with two very special guests on a very special Friday because we now know the NBA Finals matchup. As seen earlier this week, Carsen Williams is joining us again on his show. Carsenites, if you want to run wild in the YouTube section, all our comments on the YouTube channel get posted up on the screen while we're live. So that is an incentive to watch our show on our YouTube channel as we're live, 12:30 to 1 p.m. Eastern time, for a quick little 30-minute on your lunch break. Let us know who you are, where you're watching from, and what you're excited about, because we're talking about the NBA Finals. And, of course, we had to bring in our basketball guy, Trevor Everette, from the Two Pointers podcast. Trevor hosted a trivia showdown between me and Carsen last summer, and I am happy to report that I did win that. If you want to see me dominate Carsen in a trivia showdown, it wasn't really dominate. I think I actually came back in that matchup, and
the score was like 2-1 or something, right?
I won. That's the most important thing. That's the only thing. I'm 1-0 in trivia showdowns, and if Trevor ever wants to invite me back on, I am more than happy to beat Carsen or beat anybody else for that matter. Now, there was a team who did not get to come back in their playoff series, and that's the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Dallas Mavericks. That series ended this past last night. And so we now know that it's going to be the Dallas Mavericks versus the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. Carsen, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on the game last night? And do you think it's pretty impressive for Dallas to get here, because they weren't even in the playoffs last year, and now they're going to the NBA Finals?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even really think it was much of a game last night. Luka just set the tone with those 20 points in the first quarter, and that was wraps. Minnesota never really had much of a chance to get back. You get 36 and 36 from Luka and Kyrie, respectively. Cat and Ant were the only people who did anything on Minnesota, which is kind of ironic because they were the people that haven't been doing anything for Minnesota in the past, 4 games, or I guess they played pretty well in game 4, but games 1 through 3 were just abysmal from both of them. And the supporting cast played well, but not last night. They were the only two to score double figures. So that was really it. I thought that Minnesota was a better team, top to bottom. But when you just have two shot makers on the level of Luka and Kyrie, people who can just go get buckets at any time, then it doesn't really matter. Nobody was really physical enough on Minnesota's end to deal with Luka. Jay McDaniels is great, but just in terms of physicality and like weight and strength, they just couldn't deal with Luka, and that was the difference to me.
Which, Trevor, that's very interesting, because if you listen to the media, Dallas was always called soft. I've been very critical of Kyrie Irving. My stance might have changed. But Luka Doncic was like, oh, Luka doesn't play defense. And they were going up against a team that had a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year in Rudy Gobert. Were you shocked in how this series went down?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to say I was shocked would be a lie. Am I surprised that Dallas has been this good? No. I mean, you mentioned the year off that they took. Missing the playoffs last year. We call it a year off because at this point they intentionally did what they did. They got Derek Lively, who was a really important piece for this team. Obviously, glad to see he's doing better. I don't know. I'm not sure that wasn't a concussion, but neither here nor there. I'm not a doctor. But they needed somebody like him. They needed the big depth to be able to match Minnesota. This is not a Minnesota team that's injured. This is not a Minnesota team we can make an excuse for. They got through the champs, and here they are. And to say it's in an embarrassing fashion, I'll call it, for how good they are, Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some choice mistakes there with Cat that, I'm sure I will probably bring up again at some point today. But at the end of the day, like this is, to say it's a shock would be a lie. But at the same time, Dallas is really good.
Yeah, and Dallas, it's working with Luka and Kyrie right now. Derek Lively also making history, former Duke player. He left, I thought, a year early for Duke's sake and Lively's sake. I was like, okay, he needs to work on his offense. Now he has a stat that nobody else has in NBA playoff history, 16 of 16 in this series through 4 games. He missed one of them due to injury. That is the most field goals without a miss in NBA playoff history. Derek Lively. And that is the most outlandish stat I could think of right now. But when it comes to Duke guys, I've been very critical of Kyrie Irving. And I know you guys have listened to me and, may have agreed or disagreed at some points. I mean, Kyrie Irving has been a diva, whether he was in Boston or certainly in Brooklyn during that disaster run with Kevin Durant and James Harden. But now Kyrie Irving in Dallas just feels different. And I feel like that's why it's working. Carsen, what's your thoughts on watching a fellow Duke guy succeed?
Yeah, it's been awesome. Him and Derek Lively. Just to bring up that stat real quick, it's awesome, but it's pretty easy when all of your shots are coming with both hands hanging on the rim. It's all just lobs from Luka, but still impressive. Kyrie really has just completely shifted like his reputation and like how people were talking about him. You can just see it on like social media as everybody now is like, I love this new Kyrie. He's a better teammate. He is a winner. And you can see that on the defensive end. He's really stepped up there where before he was a defensive liability. He really is just a really perfect number 2 who can, he's okay to sit back. He's a good off-ball player, which we saw in Cleveland. But he can also take over, which we saw multiple times in this game, and we've seen a lot throughout these playoffs. He's a winner, and he's a great teammate, and he really cares about the game and about his teammates. And I don't know, he seems like somebody that I would want on my team.
Trevor, now that Kyrie is on Dallas and he's playing the way he is, and actually he's on the court, he's actually playing, but he's playing at extreme high level. What are your thoughts on Kyrie's resurgence in Dallas?
I don't know if I have any, because at the end of the day, like, this is the best he's played since he left Cleveland. I mean, it just is what it is. Like, Lucas seems happy he's there. Like, we've tried to pair up 5 different guys with Lucas since he's been in the league, and this is the one that's worked out. I'm not sure I would have had Kyrie in the top 3 of guys that would have worked out like this. The defensive stuff, like, he's going to have these moments, but it's so interesting because it just seems like the chemistry is cooking at the right time for only being now together for, a full season. It's interesting. It seems like he understands. Maybe it took 3 stops and maturing to get there. I don't know. But it seems like he really understands, like, okay, I'm not the 1A that I maybe thought originally I would be, because that's kind of how the whole Cleveland thing ended, without going too much into how that story ended. But he kind of just understands, like, I can be a 1A when Luka, the problem is Luka doesn't have nights where he's not the 1A. Really, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't. So Kyrie can be like that, and he can be an incredible closer, and that's really what they need him to be. That's why I kind of didn't dog on him too much about the 9 field goal attempts a game or whatever it was in the second round, because they didn't need him to be like that. They needed him to be complimentary, and that really did work in the second round for them against a really young team because they had role players that stepped up instead. So, he had a really, interesting second round, but it just shows you he's still a championship level player. He never wasn't that. It's just there were some things that got in the way, whether they were self-inflicted or not.
And it was a great 1-2 punch last night. I remember turning to my dad and I'm like, Dad, Minnesota Timberwolves are beating Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving by 16 points. It was 88-72 at one point in the fourth quarter. I'm like, will Luka and Kyrie come back? Like, it was literally on the back of those 2 guys, with PJ Washington coming from Charlotte to end up in Dallas in the NBA Finals. Derek Lively as a rookie, where I said he needed a year to stay in college, and he didn't.
Jaden Hardy needs to be given some love and shout out. People don't understand, like, to be the 8th player on a bench for a team. He was a top 5 guy in his class. Like I don't want to get anything twisted. There was some, I think it was work ethic issues or something. He slipped to like a ridiculous number in the draft when, we all put our boards together, those of us that did draft work that year, and we're all like, wow, we all have Jaden Hardy as a top 10 player. And it's amazing, wow, how we just kind of are wrong about stuff, or we misconceive how things are going to be done pre-draft process, or maybe something you find out, interviews, whatever. He slips to I think he slipped into the second round. Like, it's stupid. Like, he's an incredible player. He's a top 5 player in his high school class. I'm pretty sure he was 4th. Like, hello, he's now playing meaningful minutes. Like, the Josh Green thing aside, like, Josh Green's been in that offense and been in that system a long time. Like, if he makes a couple threes, I'm willing to live with that. But Jaden Hardy, like, is getting to the basket and doing things that no other player has confidence in doing right now at his age, and it's incredible to watch.
And I want to shout out Dante Exum, too. I thought that he's played some really good minutes.
He was literally out of the league. I mean, like, that.
Yeah,
it's not like people joke about he's almost out of the league. Like, he was literally not in the league for 3 to 4 years. It's crazy.
It's been so impressive. Just this turnaround from the franchise in general. That trade when they got rid of, or no, not even a trade, they lost Brunson for nothing. That should have been like a stab in the back. That should have really put this franchise down for a while. And then you miss the playoffs last season. Like, the turnaround, they have just aced every move. Derek Lively came in and people thought he was a raw prospect. I thought he was a raw prospect, and it ended up being the right move. They have just PJ Washington coming in. Derek Jones Jr. has played great. Like, every move that these guys have made since Brunson walked has just been incredible. It's been really a masterclass from the franchise.
You can thank Nico Harrison for that. Nike GM, former Nike executive, turned GM. Obviously, the connection to Kyrie there for a long time, as he was one of the people that got Kyrie to Nike a long time ago. There's some connection there, and like, I just, of course, without the proving ground for a guy like that with his background, we just had to see it to believe it, and he has this team in the freaking NBA Finals, for crying out loud. So, yeah, in 2 years, he took over the job in 2021, specifically in June of 2021. So, I mean, yeah, shout out to Harrison for that.
Yeah, been incredible.
Hey, especially taking a team who didn't make the playoffs last year all the way to the NBA Finals. And I will stand my ground on this. Luka Doncic should have been the MVP. And the fact that people looked at the regular season record to say, no, he shouldn't be, like, is a travesty, because look at what he's done in the playoffs. I mean, Luka should have been the MVP.
Well, the MVP is a regular season award.
Thank you.
There are plenty of people who get out pretty early in the playoffs that have been MVP before. And I think it was Jokic's, but, we've had this conversation before.
No, am I more willing to, like, for my ballot specifically, am I more willing now looking at it going, wow, should have probably had him second over SGA? Maybe, but SGA was the best player on the 1 seed as the youngest team in NBA history to do that. Yeah. So I kind of have to, like I want to be able to remember this. Not actually having a vote is really helpful because it's how I view a season 5 years later. I can look back at the awards. It's, okay, I have an award. If I have a vote for real, right, you have to think about what kind of things are put in play there with, like, guys' bonuses with making third team, that kind of thing. Like, Tyrese Halliburton is now eligible for a ridiculous extension. Obviously, that's a lot more power if you have that kind of power to vote. But my point being is, like, how are you going to remember this season? I'm going to remember this season by going, okay, SGA, I voted him second for MVP. I voted him second team all defense. He did not make that, which is really tragic. We're going to look at this if he makes a Hall of Fame, wins a couple championships, whatever, and we're going to go, how did he not do this or this a couple of times? And you're going to be really it's going to be really discrediting. Hey, he was the 1 seed, right? They were a 1 seed, made the second round. Like, you're going to look at this season and remember, that's how I remember SGA. How I remember Luka is this finals run. It's not going to be the fact that I voted him second MVP. Luka didn't do anything extravagantly other than lead the league in scoring to make me go, yeah, okay, probably deserving of second in MVP. There are people that I know that have votes that said, here's how I ranked them. It just got to a point where I had to rank the best players in order, and that's why Luka was second.
And
yeah,
now,
I'm completely with you, Trevor.
It's crazy to me.
I think the SGA deserved it over Luka as well. Just what he was doing on the defensive end as well. Like, Luka is he's an okay defender. People are calling him like one of the best isolation defenders in the NBA. No, he's an okay defender. So that I would have had the rankings the same. And also, Luka was pretty awful in the playoffs before this series. Kyrie was the best was the best player on Dallas all the way up until, I mean, especially through that Thunder series. So Luka has played great, but he was playing pretty awful before.
Luka was in the torture chamber, to be clear. I mean, he's still.
True.
What's crazy is, like, I talked to Grayson Hill about this guy I've mentioned many times. I've had him on my show. He was a big Thunder fan. Dort, I had to go back and look at this, but Dort held him to like his lowest consistent like counting stats ever in Luka's playoff history. Now, that doesn't mean it was bad. I would push back on that because he still had an incredible series. That's the crazy thing. Is bad for him is 22, 10, and 8. Like, it's just stupid to think. Like, for anybody else, that's like Hall of Fame, and Luka's like, well, it's kind of bad. Like, I don't know. But it is what it is. Ultimately, I'm with you, and we agree. Roundabout way, we agree on the MVP part of it.
Now, I mean, it's still a debate, and you guys can be wrong about, Luka not deserving MVP. But we do have a special treat for you because there was a certain person on Out of Pocket who said you had to lose a few times at the bigger stages to get there. And Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns were like, how much more you want us to lose? And then they end up losing in the Western Conference Finals. So we're bringing in usual producer Desmond Johnson into the show. Des, the Timberwolves did have their season end last night. So we're kind of like trying to put a bow on the Timberwolves season now, and we'll get to talk a lot more of the NBA Finals later on the show and into next week. Do you think the Timberwolves now have lost in the bigger stage? How long do you think it is until they get to the NBA Finals, if they ever make it there?
That's if they ever make it there, because it's not like it's easy to get there, and the West is just getting it better over the next couple of years. Minnesota's on the same trajectory as OKC, in my opinion, in terms of who's gonna, be atop the West going forward. Don't forget about Memphis. I think a lot of people aren't talking about the Grizzlies. They didn't have Ja Morant for like 50 plus games this year. They're going to be back. Don't count out the Nuggets. The Nuggets aren't an old team themselves. They just didn't have a bench this year. I'd imagine they're going to fix that in the offseason. So don't count them out. You got Dallas. I know they were the 6th seed, but after the trade deadline, they were one of the best teams in the West. So it's not really a surprise they're in the finals because of the way they played the last third of the year. So don't forget about the Mavs. And then you've got the older teams, the Clippers, the Lakers. The West is loaded. So it's really kind of hard to say that how long will it be before the Timberwolves get there. They're going to have to probably knock on the door a couple of times. They might get to the finals. It might necessarily mean they're going to win it when they get there. Like Boston. Like Boston's going through it right now. And they had to have a couple knocks at the door before they finally broke through and got in. Usually you're not going to win an NBA Finals if you're a superstar in your first 3 or 4 seasons. It's really rare for that to even happen, unless you're Magic Johnson and you're, tipping center as a rookie in Game 6 in the NBA Finals and you're the MVP and played 4 positions. But that's why he's a top 5 player of all time. Like, it's just, I don't know if Minnesota's actually going to get there. If they get there, it wouldn't be a surprise, but they're going to have to continuously bang their head against the wall probably another year or so before we look at them as like the team to beat.
I'm going to give him a
Trevor?
shout out because Des made a great point. Well, Magic, he brought Magic up. That is the only guy to actually do it at that age.
Yeah.
Sort of. Bill Walton did it at 24. I'm just going to give Bill Walton a shout out. Obviously, he passed away this week. I think he was 24 or 25. Won a championship that early.
I got you.
24, 25. I think he was 24, 25. I'm just giving him a shout out because that's still considered young because of course he passed away this week too. He deserves the credit he got for a player I think that's completely underrated.
77 Trailblazers.
77. Yep, 77
Yeah.
Trailblazers, which
And
is
he
still
was-
one of the
he
most
was
talented
league
teams
MVP.
ever.
Yeah, he was league MVP that year. So,
The year after. It was the year after.
Yeah,
That's the craziest
you know.
thing. He still had a better year. It's nuts. They won the championship, and then he turned around and won an MVP the next year. It's crazy. And then obviously, the foot injuries killed him.
I heard the comparison from Mad Dog Russo on First Take Wednesday, where he was saying Bill Walton is probably the closest thing to Nikola Jokic that he's seen in terms of when he wasn't
Bill Walton was
hurt,
the best
he-
passing big ever until Jokic came around. Yeah.
Right, yeah. But like his stat lines were similar to Jokic, where he was, 28, 15, or no, 28, 20, 10 assists. Like he was doing that stuff before Jokic. So it's not like Jokic is a unicorn. It's just we haven't seen him in 40 years. And the last time we saw it was Bill Walton. So
I just gave him a shout out for the young championship thing because he deserved it. That's all.
Yeah. And Carson, when we look at the Timberwolves, do you think they'll eventually get back there to the Western Conference Finals, maybe the NBA Finals?
I do think they'll make it back there. I just think that they're so talented and so well rounded. But I think it's all going to revolve around Ant. But I think that we'll have like reiterations of this team. I just think that there are some things they need to change. But the contracts right now are really killer. Like you've got Cat on a 5-year, $158 million. You've got Rudy Gobert on a 5-year, 200,000 or 200 million. So contracts are really just killing them, and I don't think they're going to be able to work the way they have. I think they need a second, because Ant isn't one of those guys who is just going to go out there and produce numbers like Luka or Jokic every night. I mean, he's had some stinkers in these playoffs, and that's just going to come with the way he plays. And then when you have a team like Dallas who is so great on the interior, then that's really where Ant struggles. So I think that we'll see this team in the finals probably. I think they'll probably win a finals with Ant eventually. I just don't think that it'll look the way that it looks now. I don't know what it'll look like, but I think something will have to change before they can ever cross that.
I'd love for them.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'd love for them to get a better facilitator of the ball, like to get Anthony Edwards involved, to get Cat involved out on the stretch, to get Gobert involved offensively. Like they need a good point guard to do that. Do you agree, Des?
They need to trade Gobert. Like they don't need him.
What?
He's a liability. Yeah. Like, how many times have you seen the defensive player of the year get picked on by the opposing offense? Like they're pulling him out and like in pick and roll so they can get him intentionally on one-on-one situations. He's the defensive player of the year. He's a liability on offense. You can't really run anything for him. There was a play, not in this series, but the Denver series, that has stuck out in my head for Rudy Gobert ever since it happened. I can't remember. He was like driving in the paint or something and lost control of the ball. And I've never seen this before. He like batted the ball like towards the goal, like just to get it up there. And you could hear it on TV, like he's lumbering down the lane. He like just kind of smacks it up towards the goal. I'm like, what is he doing? Like, and ever since then, I've been kind of watching him. He has no kind of offensive repertoire at all, like in the paint. Like if it's not a dunk, he's just kind of throwing it up there. If it's not like an alley-oop or something like that. You're playing 5-on-4 on offense when you've got him out on the floor. Naz Reid is a better player, in my opinion, like overall, in terms of what he brings to this team. And Naz Reid brings the size too. And when Naz Reid had good games, Minnesota was pretty unbeatable in the playoffs. When he wasn't, or when Cat's out here shooting 32 threes or whatever and hitting 4 of them, Timberwolves were losing. Like I don't think it's so much they need a facilitator. They just need to know their roles better. Anthony Edwards is 22. Like I don't even expect him to sniff the finals and actually be expected to win it until he's around 27, 28, because that's usually where it is. LeBron won his around that age. Jordan won his the first time around that age. Unless you're Larry Bird or Magic Johnson, you just don't win it this early. And I think we've gotten used to the kids coming out so early. They're 17, 18 years old when they get here. So like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, we've seen them for 8 years, and like they're 25, 26 years old. They're right around where they're supposed to be to do this. So I'm not saying Ant can't do it, but I don't expect him to do it in the next 2 or 3 years. Like there's teams in front of him that are in line to do it.
Well, the teams in front of him right now are the Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Derek Lively, PJ Washington, the former Charlotte Hornet. And then on the Boston Celtics side, you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis. Like you have guys who are like, okay, let's see if Boston can finally like break through that glass ceiling. And now they're there.
Watch out for the Knicks because they've got a bunch of cap space and they've got a bunch of draft picks too. OKC still has a bunch of draft picks and they pretty much built their core and they're all young too. Like it's just, there's so many teams like on both sides that I can't just say Minnesota is going to be next. They're just in that batch of next, there's like 6 or 7 teams that are in the same area as Minnesota right now, in my opinion.
They got to take advantage of this capitalization window they're in. To Carsen's credit, their contracts are not only going to get really weird now, they're going to get really weird soon because they're going to be a first or even second apron team. And they're in this weird limbo right now. For those that don't know or may not remember, they're in a legal battle with the ownership, right? The ownership is probably trying to figure out the Alex Rodriguez deal. I think Mark Galore or whatever his name is the other guy involved in that. You see these guys on the court side with the current owner, right? And they're trying to work all that out. You are going to have to figure out, if you're going to end up being first, second apron, is Alex Rodriguez going to front that check? As a brand new owner, history tells us they probably will, but that might critically cap this team for a really long time if they're not careful. And then obviously the contracts, like that just is what it is. the Gobert thing, we don't have enough time to go into what Des talked about with the Gobert thing. What I would say, though, is I have confidence in Tim Connolly, the guy that built the Nuggets into a championship contender, to figure this out. So that's kind of the caveat is if they do trade Gobert, which I don't agree with, is they got to figure that out. They got to understand, okay, this is what my cap's going to look like, whether I keep this guy or not. Conley's obviously, getting up in age. You don't want him to be your championship level point guard next year or even the year after, probably. That's why I agree on the playmaker part of it. I agree on getting somebody in there that can distribute the ball that's not at Mike Conley's age that I think will help them. But they've got bigger fish to fry. They've got contracts to figure out. They've got to figure out a way to keep guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Even though he didn't have a good Western Conference Finals, he's still an integral piece to their defense, which is why they were what they were.
Did Edwards already sign his extension? His rookie extension?
I don't
Okay,
know.
because he was in the same class as
lot.
LaMelo Ball, so yeah, I would imagine it's 200-something million because that's what LaMelo got. He went third, so
Yeah, Anthony Edwards is locked into Minnesota, and he's getting paid a lot.
yeah, it's like 270 million or something like that. Yeah, so
Yeah,
because LaMelo got 265.
I got it right here.
James Wiseman, that's who it was.
Wow.
That drafted between
42. Edwards is 42.3, 45, 49, 52, 55 UFA, and 29.30.
That's like
Wow.
260 something million. I think.
Yeah, it wasn't the
5
full
years,
season.
260 million.
Well, because it was the old cap at the time. It was not the cap that
Yeah.
we're currently going to have. So
And then when this come up, they're going to be in the new TV deal, so the cap's probably going to be a lot higher.
it already projected 8.5 million, I think, is the raise.
Yeah, so there'll be some space. They just got to again. Rudy is good to be there when they're beating Denver because that's why he's there. They built that team to beat Denver, but they didn't think past Denver. And once they got past Denver, Rudy became a liability. Like you just can't leave him out there.
You have to get through Denver. You have to get through Denver every year right now, though. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Right.
You can't just
Denver
get rid
is
of
the
Gobert
one.
and then assume you're going to just run through the playoffs with a 22
or
year old
not
Edwards.
necessarily get rid of him, bench him. Start Naz Reid, bring Gobert off the bench. Like if they had brought Reid off the bench, if they had started Naz Reid the past 3 games, they'd still be alive in the playoffs, in my opinion. And if Rudy was coming off the bench, and if Cat wasn't shooting 3 free throws for the first 3 games of the series or whatever, if he had realized he was the biggest player on the court,
This is a bigger
at
cap
7-3
problem than
in the
anything
paint.
else. Let's just call it what
it's
it
really-
is. It's
yeah.
a bigger cap problem.
Yeah, he fell in love with the 3. That's really kind of that was their demise, really. And they popped back up to life once he realized, hey, I'm 7'3". I'm gonna go drive into the paint. They can't guard me. He finally, game 4. Thanks, Cat. You kind of realize that nobody can guard you in the paint instead of posting up 30 feet out from the rim. Like the NBA switching back to what I call the traditional Carolina roster, where you've got 2 big men on the floor, you've got a 3rd big man coming off the bench, you've got 2 guards that can handle the ball on the floor at any given time, and you're running about 9 guys. Like that's the Carolina formula, basically, and that's kind of what you just saw with the Mavs. The Mavs have literally the blueprint of what we expect of Carolina in terms of their roster. That's the Dallas Mavericks. They've built it like that, and now we get to see it on a pro level.
And we'll get to see it, and we'll get to talk a lot more NBA Finals next week. We're closing in on our 1 o'clock stop time, so you guys can get back to work on your Friday lunch breaks. But before we go, I did want to get like a really quick snippet of your prediction a week out from these NBA Finals. It starts in about 5 or 6 days, so we'll have a good rest. Trevor, Boston, Dallas. Can I get you to predict this, or are you going to, pass it on?
Yeah, because I have 96 hours to change it. I mean, like it's not like what I say now. People are gonna be like, "Oh, I can change it between now and Thursday at 8:30." I'm gonna go with Boston, and I'm gonna go with Boston in 7 for a couple of reasons, really quick. They have the defense to just let Luka do whatever Luka's gonna do. And obviously, we know the role players. At the end of the day, if you're just going to go role player here, I'm going to take Boston. I think I'm going to take the more consistent team that has a better defensive role player set up with Drew Holiday and Derek White. Yes, it's crazy. I think those guys are considered role players. But Luka can do what Luka's going to do. Jaylen Brown's been an exceptional defender this playoffs. They're going to have guys that like him to throw at Luka. At the end of the day, they've been through it. Like to hear people discredit Boston in their run because they haven't won a finals when they've made 7 Eastern Conference finals in 9 years, and 2 of those, or one of those was a finals, now 2 technically, is insane. And this team is built to win this championship, and I think they're going to, regardless of how incredible I think Luka is. Luka's reached this point. That's an overarching thought I'll do maybe next time I'm on here or something. But Luka's reached this point where like he's in like all-time player stratosphere of players to be feared. And if he wins this in 6, like the person on the screen that just popped up, like I'm not going to be shocked by that, to be completely honest. But Boston is better built to win, so I'm going with my brain in this case. And I do think it'd be really cool to see Luka win a championship. But I think Boston, not saying Boston deserves it more because they've won 18 titles, whatever. Not at all want that to be construed. But Boston is built to win a championship really, really well and experienced.
Trevor's going Boston. Max going Dallas Mavs. Des, where are you going?
7.
It's so weird because Boston, they have a bunch of two-way guys that can guard. And that's not what the Mavs just went through, with Minnesota. But the Mavs have something going on. Like, I just like the way they're built, their roster. And it's hard to – I don't know if Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can guard Luka and Kyrie. Like, they're just on a tear right now. I think I'm rolling with Dallas. Although it should be Boston's time, in theory, based on everything I've said the past couple of weeks. This is Boston's championship to win. Yep. I don't know. It's something about Dallas, man. I'm looking at Dallas, and I feel like they're going to pull this off. I'm going to go with them.
6 or 7, I'm just curious.
7. I'll go 7.
I think this series goes 7 regardless of who wins.
So if Dallas beats Boston at the Garden in Game 7, only the Lakers have ever done that in history, if I'm not mistaken. So
all the stuff I said about Luka all time, like what I just said at the end there, and I have a bigger point that would take longer. I'm not going to do right now. But to talk about how Luka's reached the stratosphere of feared players, if he does that, I'm putting him in places in my all-time rankings that I promise you guys are not like going to understand, because like you just said, there's no other team that's ever done that. That would basically be Luka. Like if he has a good game, it's Luka. Luka walking into the Garden and doing that, it's insane to put. Like there's not anybody else in NBA history that's ever done that.
I think the Lakers have done it. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
they might be the only one. Yeah, they're the only ones that have done it. That was the Magic's Lakers in the 80s. So
that would be kind of crazy. That would be super wild if Luka did that. I forgot if they go 7, it's going to be in Boston.
Yep.
I'm going to go.
So
Sorry,
that did sound like Carsen. Do you see Carsen?
No,
I
it
don't
does.
see Carsen.
I'm on my Facebook feed trying to share it, and the speaker.
Oh,
it was him.
Nice.
Carsen, is that you? But we'll hopefully get Carson's pick. I think his Wi-Fi cut him out. But yeah, we'll get Carsen back on the show, I'm sure, sometime next week to get his pick. For me, again, if Trevor's saying I got 96 hours to change this, and this is that aged well segment, I'm going to go Boston in 7, just because TD Garden is where Boston has made their magic for all season. And if they were to lose in that atmosphere in Game 7, it would just crumble.
The mayor of Boston would have to
Boston.
issue a state of emergency. Like, I'm dead serious. If they lose Game 7 in Boston, they're going to have to issue a state of emergency.
Yeah.
No question asked.
It would look pretty tough. We are past the 1 o'clock hour. Des, what do we expect on TGI Friday lineup?
Today we've got a pretty loaded lineup starting at 3. Actually, today we're running the Drop the Mic podcast with Mike and Shannon Smith, talking pro wrestling from the past week. That's at 3. The All Hornets Sports Illustrated podcast is at 4, previewing guards for the upcoming draft for the Hornets. And then at 5, it's Franchise Players, hosted by me. This week, we've got USA Baseball's Darren Vaught on, previewing the College World Series. We've got Matt Acquiza and Sam Dracula from the All Hornets Sports Illustrated crew talking about the NBA playoffs, previewing the finals, and also what the Hornets should do with the number 6 overall pick. So you can listen to all that at tobaccoroadsportsradio.com, or if you're in the Triad, you can hear it on WWBG 1470 AM starting at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. All our stuff out of pockets, drop the mics. They're all available on demand on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. That's why you should go subscribe. Thank you so much for Des hopping in. I know he's had a busy day. Thanks for Trevor. Go follow his stuff with the 2 Points podcast. Thank you for Carsen as well. This will be Out of Pocket with Michael Davis. We'll be back Monday afternoon, 12:30 for your lunch break. And until then, everyone, have a phenomenal weekend. We will see you back here on Monday.